It's a busy season with Christmas and New Year's. Most of us have our calendars and schedules maxed out, which can make it really hard to get meals on the table for your family. If you want to prioritize those special family meals around the dinner table, I have a few tips to help you with that. If you're new here to our channel, then you may not have seen some of my other cooking videos. I have a full kitchen tour, and I also have a video that really helps talking about the joy of home cooking and cooking from scratch meals for your family. And so if you haven't seen those videos, then I will post those below. And I also have a lot of videos that show step-by-step cooking and how I throw meals together for my family. But I feel like with this time of year, it being so busy, it's so hard for moms who have so much on their plates to get meals on the table. And so I really wanted to put together some of my most simple and favorite meals that I have just made on repeat over the years, especially during busy seasons like the holidays or when you have little children running around. And so I wanted to share those specific meals with y'all today. If you've seen many of my videos, then you probably already know that one of our most favorite side items to have is mashed potatoes. And this is actually a very simple side to throw together. If you have 4 or 5 potatoes, all that you need to do is peel them, wash them, and then cut them into cubes. It usually takes me about maybe 5 minutes or so to honestly do the whole process. Just make sure you have a really good sharp knife, a cutting board, and before you start peeling your potatoes, go ahead and get your water on the stove, add your salt to it. It'll help it bring it to a boil quicker. I always just add my potatoes into boiling water. It just makes the whole process of making this side item go a lot quicker. And so this is one way that you can make something that is a side item that is very filling for a large family in a very quick way. Also with mashed potatoes, I find that I usually always have on hand what I need to make them. So it's not typical for us to run out of milk or butter or salt or even sour cream. I tend to keep all of that on hand. And I think as you continue on your cooking from scratch journey, you'll find that there are certain ingredients that you just keep in your refrigerator at all times. And typically most people do have milk, sour cream, butter, salt, or whatever other type of seasonings you might want to add into mashed potatoes. But what I really love is that you can make mashed potatoes a lot of different ways. I added in some cream cheese, butter, sour cream, and raw milk into this particular night's mashed potatoes, and I added in a little bit of poultry seasoning as well that had kind of a garlic flair with a little bit of herb, and it was really good. And I paired that with a baked ham and some homemade macaroni and cheese that also had some broccoli mixed in with it. And so with mashed potatoes and other side items, I find that if you wanted to add sharp cheddar or bacon, you can really change things up. And so it's something that really doesn't take that long to make from scratch. It's simple, and you can add different things into it if you get tired of constantly having mashed potatoes. Another tip that I have for incorporating vegetables, because if you're like me and your meal doesn't include vegetables, then you start to feel bad, but they kind of can become difficult to deal with if you're not used to just preparing some type of vegetable side. And one of the things I really like to do is if I'm making something, I like to just add the vegetables into what I'm cooking. So for this particular night, like I said, I made the homemade macaroni and cheese, and so I just mixed in the broccoli with that because macaroni and cheese has a really yummy, salty, buttery, cheesy flavor which goes well with broccoli, and it's a little secret trick that kids really like. So they love macaroni and cheese, so if you just add a little bit of broccoli into that, then they don't really pay too much attention to it. And so It's one way that I do like to get vegetables into our meal without it being an overly complicated task of cooking a whole separate thing just to include vegetables. So with these particular side items, something that you could definitely do that would make the whole process of throwing these together a little bit quicker would be to, one, chop up your broccoli ahead of time, two, shred your cheddar cheese ahead of time. You could even peel your potatoes and chop those up a little bit before you're ready to cook them. Those things, although they're simple tasks, they do take time, and so I've realized over the years cooking from scratch that if I do take a little pocket of time and try to prep those items in advance, if you do buy your groceries over the weekend, you could plan a day over the weekend to shred your cheese, to chop your vegetables, and to do things like that, so that when you're actually going to cook, it's less work and you get the whole thing done a lot faster and easier, and it allows you to bring meals together just in a much easier way than it would if you had to do everything all at once. I also like to bring up any of our frozen meat upstairs and go ahead and get that into the refrigerator, because I know most likely I'm going to be cooking with it. And also I like to use one meat for multiple different meals throughout the week. If I have some cooked chicken, I like to save that and throw that in with a chicken casserole or chicken noodle soup. Or if I have ground beef, I could do a chili or a spaghetti, or I could do a taco night. And so just kind of being able to meal plan a little bit. It's not that you have to have a full-blown meal plan, but knowing that you can use certain meats in multiple different meals throughout your week will, one, save you money, and two, save you time, because you're not having to cook a meat every single night. And so those are a few tips that I have really found helpful throughout the years of cooking from scratch meals for my family. I am also a really big fan of one pot meals. I think most of our weeknight meals tend to be something thrown together in one pot. If I don't have my vegetables already prepped, all I have to really worry about is getting a vegetable, a meat, and some stock or whatever I have on hand into a pot, making a roux, doing things like that. So that is sort of something I wanted to include in this video, because whenever you are starting to cook meals from scratch and you feel like that you can't get meals done quickly, is throwing everything into one pot is so simple. And honestly, I feel like that's the way that our grandparents who had 10 children cooked, because they could really spread out what they had if they put it all together into one big pot and divvied it out amongst their families. So it's budget friendly, it's simple, it's easy, it's fast, it's less cleanup. And so I use my Instant Pot all the time. I did make a pot roast in it recently, and I threw together the pot roast, some seasoning, a little bit of carrots and celery. Sometimes if I have on hand, I'll do potatoes and onion, or I'll make mashed potatoes. You could even go as far as making a homemade gravy with the stock left over from your roast in the Instant Pot. And so kind of exploring the creativity in the kitchen of what you can do with what you have on hand. But that's a very simple meal to throw together in the Instant Pot, as is any kind of soup. It's so simple to throw in some chicken, to cook it in the Instant Pot. And that's just one way that I really like to kind of meal prep my meat, is just by throwing it in there and cooking it and then shredding it, and then I can add it into what I want to later. With this particular meal, something that I could do with it, if we didn't finish off the roast with the carrots and celery, and that is a complete meal to me with a little bit of bread on the side, but you could use the leftover roast to throw together a beef stew if you wanted to make a really nice buttery roux to start with, and then add in a little flour and milk and get a nice base going. Add in some of the stock left over from the roast, add the roast in, throw in some potatoes potatoes, some carrots, some celery if you have any left over. And although it is a similar meal to what you had before, it's just stretching what you have on hand a little bit further, which is helpful for anybody that wants to create a budget-friendly meal. I know that I've mentioned making a roux before, but the roux can be your base for any kind of gravy. If you want to make a homemade biscuits and gravy, it can be the base for any kind of potato soup or stew, and it can also be the base for a cheese sauce for macaroni and cheese. And so in order to make a roux, you add butter or grease from your bacon drippings or sausage drippings. You add in a little bit of flour. You can add in either milk or stock from chicken, roast, any kind of that. You can make a brown gravy, a chicken gravy. The roux is basically the foundation of what you can create in the kitchen for your meals. And so for this particular meal, I was making some homemade macaroni and cheese, which is actually very easy to make. You boil your noodles, you make your roux with butter and flour and milk, you add in some sharp cheddar cheese and some seasonings, and you have a really delicious cheese sauce to pour over your macaroni and cheese. And you can either choose to bake your macaroni and cheese, or you can eat it just as is. And so that is the beauty of learning some of these techniques about cooking from scratch, is that you can see how that these techniques really help simplify the cooking process and make it a lot quicker and easier whenever you want to pull meals together for your family. Another favorite of mine to make, as you've seen me make in previous videos, is homemade biscuits. And so I know that it seems like that this wouldn't be something simple, but you can make these biscuits and freeze them. So if it's easier for you to make them in a really large batch and freeze them and then just pull them out when you need them, what I do when I freeze the biscuits is I go ahead and mix them all together, and before I bake them, I put them on a cookie sheet and I line them just on the cookie sheet, not touching each other, and flash freeze those in the freezer, and then put them into a bag and just let them be in the freezer, and then pull them out and actually bake them once I'm ready to. So that is one thing I have done that has worked for me. You could also bake them and then freeze them if that worked better for you, but this is one of the ways that I find that is simple. Honestly, it's just butter, buttermilk, and self-rising flour to make your own homemade biscuits. And so they're so simple and easy to make, and they're one of my favorite side items to have with most meals. I'm adding these clips in here for y'all so that you can see some of the different more bread side items that I typically make with our dinners. And so, like I already showed you, I make a lot of the homemade biscuits, and I also do a lot of cornbread. And I know that whenever you're first starting to cook from scratch, you feel like that you have so many things to learn, but making homemade cornbread, making homemade biscuits, they use very simple ingredients: milk, olive oil, eggs, and Crisco for, if you just keep those things on hand, and then of course your self-rising cornmeal, you can whip these things together really quickly. I don't think it takes me any longer than 10 or 15 minutes truly to whip together a pan of cornbread or a pan of homemade biscuits, and they really help stretch your meals. They're super simple to make, and they're very easy and versatile. I've changed my biscuit recipe over to garlic butter biscuits if we're having them with dinner. I've made just simple buttermilk biscuits for breakfast. I've done just classic cornbread with no additions. I've done cheddar jalapeno cornbread with different spices, and so you can see how you really can change these side items up to fit whatever you're cooking for dinner that night. I hope that this video was helpful for y'all as you go into your kitchens and start cooking from scratch meals. I hope that it sparks a little inspiration and creativity and helps you really see how that you can pull from scratch meals together in a simple manner, quickly and easily for your family once you get some of these things down pat. Thank you all so much for following along, and I'll see you on Thursday.